Welcome to my River Rocks Paint Along video set, part 3, the narrated step-by-step tutorial. On the right is a reference photo for this painting, on the left is the artistic interpretation. This is the drawing that I used for this painting. It's a very simple line drawing. And I've prepared the surface by applying liquid masking fluid liberally with a toothbrush. It creates a nice splatter effect that will help give texture as we apply the wash. And as you can see, as throughout this tutorial, as I apply my wash, you'll start to see where the masking fluid has been applied, and in the end, once it's dried and removed, it'll leave that textural quality to the shapes that we're painting. So I'm going to begin here by liberally applying a loose wash of a neutral mixture to many of these rock shapes. And this particular one is a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And if you've watched the exercise video, you will have seen several of these combinations being used in that exercise. I'm working my way around the composition, applying some of these washes, and now I'm taking some coarse salt and putting in what is still a damp surface, and it helps enhance that textural quality that we're looking for to give the suggestion of this kind of granite-like rock surfaces that are in our reference photo. On this rock shape, I'm putting a much deeper value, and this mixture is a combination of viridian and alizarin crimson. It creates an almost black tone. I'm going to put some more water on that and lighten that up and gradate that out. Continue to move that tone around. This is the same mixture here. And I'm going to take that mixture and put a little bit more towards the red side. And if you recall from part 2 of this paint along in the exercise, we were creating some of these very same variations of the color mixture in that exercise. So we have that neutral gray with just a touch more red added, so it gives that kind of a reddish quality to that gray rock. Now I'm going to take that alizarin crimson and add just a touch of yellow ochre in it, and you can see the nice red tone that I'm getting, and I've got a little bit of ultramarine blue mixed into that. So give me this nice red rock, which is positioned perfectly to become a focal point for this composition, because just about all the other rocks are very much closer to a neutral gray, and these two rocks that are positioned here in that top left quarter are a much different tone, and they kind of stand out and draw the eye in right where you want to center your focal point, following the rule of thirds. And if you're not familiar with the rule of thirds, you can look up my video that's a quick tip on the rule of thirds and finding your center of interest. This rock has an interesting quality to it. It's got some very dark colors woven in the red. It's a real interesting rock shape, and so I'm taking a little ultramarine blue with this alizarin crimson and ochre, and giving this interesting quality to this shape. Here I'm continuing to work my way around the composition, painting these various rock shapes. And what I'm doing is I'm mixing a neutral, and it could be a bluish neutral or a reddish neutral or kind of a dark charcoal neutral. And then I'm looking for the rocks in the composition that have that tone, and I'm just going all over the composition, getting the same general tones all at once. There are some rocks in the reference that have kind of a nice ochre tone to them, and so I'm going to touch that color on some of those rocks, and they're smaller rocks, but I'm going to put some indications of that color in a few different places throughout the composition here. Here I'm going to start painting the space in between the rocks, and I've got this, it's a little bit of an earthy red tone that I've mixed up using the various paints that I've used so far. It's a little bit of the alizarin, a little yellow ochre in it, and just a touch of ultramarine blue. Here I'm going to start working some darker values in between these rocks, and it's going to start to give them a little bit more, make them a little bit more dimensional, and they'll start to bring some of those darker tones gradated up onto the actual rock shapes to give them some more volume to their shape. So this is a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna in a very thick concentration. So I'm just giving touches of dark value where these rocks intersect and start to give, as I said, a little bit more dimension to the overall composition and to the individual rocks themselves. This is a nice dark value, and I'm working around some of these smaller shapes as well as the big rocks. And you start getting a value that's dark into your painting that really starts to solidify it, and it starts to take on the stone starts to take on more volume, and you start to get a little bit more depth to your painting. So I'm taking the spray here to gradate some of that tone up onto the rocks themselves. Now I'm applying this nice rich tone here. It's hard to see, but I'm using a combination of the Viridian and alizarin crimson to make a very dark value, and I'm alternating that with the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue to make a very dark value. And you can see when you start to get a nice dark shape like this in here what the impact is to the shapes that it's surrounding. It really makes them start to stand out. I'm working a little bit more of this dark value around these rocks that have this nice red tone, and some of these other ones. And as this starts to build and these layers start to build and the values start to get darker, you can feel it starting to take shape and start to seem like could be a riverbed full of rocks where before it looked more just like some painted shapes, the arbitrary shapes on the paper. Now I'm going to take a richer mixture of that alizarin crimson with a little ultramarine blue, and give this rock a lot more pizzazz, a little bit more pop to it. And it's really going to start to become a center of interest here. And you can see as I apply this wash, that you can see where that masking fluid has been splattered there. It's not removed yet, but when we do, we're going to get that nice texture. I've got that large light gray rock at the top there, and I want to make it stand out a little bit more, so I'm putting that dark value neutral kind of on the underside of it. And I also want to create a little bit more texture on the rock itself. It has more going on than what is shown right now. So I'm taking a little bit of this kind of charcoal-y color and just using the side of my brush and just kind of half dry brushing, although it's still got very wet elements to it. And then I'm going to take a spray bottle and I'm going to soften those marks up just a little bit, but I still want to try and keep the character of the dry brush. So I actually have a couple different neutrals in there. One's a little a little bit more warm than the other one. So here I'm going to hit it with a spray bottle to soften those up a little bit. But that creates a lot more texture on that one large rock. I'm going to take the same approach on this rock here. Use a little dry brush, and the direction that I go helps make it feel like it's part of that the surface that it's on, the rock. It kind of contours what's going on in on the stone itself. I've reached a point where I'm ready to take off the masking fluid that was applied before I began painting. So I'm using a rubber cement pickup eraser, and now you can start to see the texture that's starting to appear where that masking fluid was protecting the white of the paper. As I remove this, I just rub my hand across it to try and feel where I might have missed a spot or so, and then I just go back with the eraser. But it's probably the best way that I know to make sure that I've got everything. And every now and then, all of a sudden, I'll realize I didn't get something as I'm painting or something, and I just rub it off. You can see the texture that this masking fluid has left on the paper and in the composition. Now, the fact of the matter is I don't want to retain the pure white in all those places. They're going to become not white but lights. I'll take some glaze here in a wash and just put over top of some of these on the rocks to tone it down a little bit. But it still leaves a nice texture. It's just toned down a little bit with a wash. I still want to bring some more definition to some of these areas of overlap and the undersides of some of these rock shapes so that they look a little bit more pronounced. So I've got again, a very dark value here, and I'm I'm painting some of these areas with a larger dark shade. Look at this really rich value that's being woven between these rocks. It really starts to make this painting come together here, and these rocks start to stand out. And that nice dark shape that's surrounding those red tone rocks really help draw the eye in. Value is such a powerful design element, and it's so often overlooked. It's very hard to have an effective painting without good value contrast or good value structure. So I'm taking this somewhat neutral glaze, and I'm just putting it around some of these forms to give them a little bit more volume. And you can see how, as I apply this, I try and contour the shape. See how I'm just wrapping it around, trying to follow the form of the rock. And I'm going to come in here on some of these and just soften them up a little bit with a spray bottle. Here I'm taking this Quill Brush, and I'm taking a very dark value again, and I'm just putting touches of value where some of these rocks intersect. Just little marks that start to add just an element of detail. So I'm working around the composition here. I'm putting some of these little marks in a lot of places in the composition. It gives just this little element of detail, makes the rocks feel a little bit more like they're on the ground, and there's a little bit of a shadow under them, and gives a little separation between the edges of various rocks. But it doesn't take much, just a little mark, a little dot or a little dash, and it does the job. One of the final things I'm going to do here is I want to bring a little bit more of a blue tone to a few of these rocks, and so I've got a neutral that's heavily influenced with cerulean blue, so it's leaning very much towards the cerulean blue side of things, and I'm just going to put some touches of that color on a few of these rocks in the composition just to introduce that kind of it's almost a greenish blue element that I've got. So just a little bit more, a little dry brush. You can see I've already have some indication of that color, but I just want to make it a little stronger in a few spots. So that's my painting river rocks. I hope if you were able to follow along, you were able to gain some experience or increase your understanding of some of the key concepts that were the objectives of this paint along. Things such as mixing neutrals, working with larger brushes, creating textures, gradation of value and color, and the artistic interpretation of your subject. And that's what I'm going to close with. This was an attempt to copy a photograph. This was an artistic interpretation of a subject, and it's expressed using the key design elements of value contrast, color, and texture. And that's the difference between copying a photograph and trying to create a painting. I hope you've enjoyed this. This is the first true paint along video series that I've done. So I appreciate your comments, and if you do have any questions, you can email me at contact.rsurwitzart@gmail.com. And if you want to see more videos, you can check out my playlist by searching YouTube for Rick Surwitz Watercolor. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like it, share it, and again, I appreciate your comments. Thanks for watching.